Hello and welcome to this special mini-series podcast from Game Dev London. My name is Stuart de Ville, he, him, and today my co-host is Shin, she, her. Today's episode is sponsored by Samsung King's Cross, London's hub of innovation. So Jay, where are we starting today?
So thanks for the intro and everything. It's been so great to do more videos with you. So I'm really looking forward to the pod series. So last time we were talking about personal development and reflection and kind of deciding on whether starting up a business is for you, because obviously there's different ways of getting into game development.
Yeah, for sure.
So last week we were talking about whether you wanted to become an employee or whether you wanted to become an employer. Very different paths.
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
This week's video, or today's episode, is about you've made that decision. You've decided that you're going to be a business owner, and we're here just sharing some tips on how to start up in the UK and not drown while doing it, basically. Yes. So what are some tips that you would recommend for the first time?
Yeah, top tips for getting into the industry. Well, so I think that one of the things that I did while starting up actually was making sure that it wasn't going to be the death of me. And by that, I mean that I didn't just dive into it, set up the business straight away, bring on a team of 15 people that I've plucked out of thin air. And actually what I kind of thought about is, what do I need almost as a side hustle to make sure that I'm stable enough that if I am going to start a company, that it's not like the hill I die on, if you will.
It's so true. Just the fact that people don't really understand there's a benchmark for how much you're gonna need to survive each month, and there's so much risk in just jumping into something without having a safety net.
Yeah.
So the kind of tips that I would say in terms of that would be to take your time, find out as much as you can about the environment that you're kind of operating in. And that's true for any kind of industry, wouldn't you say?
I think it's true for any idea you have. It's so easy once you have an idea to just kind of leap into it. But okay, this is what I'm doing now. Let's go ahead and do it. And to some extent, that is what I did when I started out anyway. I started networking more and meeting people, and decided that I was going to form a team so I could produce my game. And very quickly ended up with a team of 5 people. And it wasn't really until that point where I was like, okay, wait. How deep into this am I going to get before I've actually built a foundation for something that's so unstable. And luckily for me, that is where I kind of took a step back and started to think about things that I need in place. And started having conversations with the people that I'd brought on board to let them know that I was in that space, because otherwise, you don't want these people that have just joined you on this crazy journey of yours to suddenly find out 5 months down the line or 10 months down the line that actually you don't have too much of a clue what you're doing, and you can lean on them because some of them know things that you don't know. So that was kind of pretty good top tip, really.
Yeah, no, it's about finding the right team, of course, and just not neglecting that research period that you kind of need to go through. And that's sort of I think it's a rite of passage for every creative person, every kind of startup. It's just sort of I don't think anybody at the start of the journey knows anything, really.
You just have your idea.
Yeah, you have to just start doing things, and experience just comes with doing the thing, rather than, people will say oh, go on this course, for example. I'm sorry, I'm a university lecturer. I really shouldn't be saying that you shouldn't go to do a course or anything. But there's university courses are great at teaching you skills, practical skills that you need to use at work, but they're not so great at sort of telling you where to go with your career, for example. And that is something that you need to find out yourself. And the research part is so crucial. You were saying as well, a really good way of getting into indie games development is doing a lot of game jams. Right?
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
Because you end up with a product at the end of it, and you kind of work out what you're doing, what kind of people you want to roll with, and everything like that. Because it's kind of a permanent part of your company.
Yeah, so I spoke to a team who entered into a game jam recently, actually. And before that game jam, they hadn't met, they didn't know each other. I think one of the guys actually kind of slightly knew the other person, but through knowing them online, not friendship kind of. But anyway, after the game jam, they decided that they've actually got quite a good game. They do have quite a good game, as it turns out. And they were okay, so what's the next step? And then they started looking for a mentor. And I spoke to him a little bit and said, what would be my tips for how to go about forming themselves as a company and entity and stuff. One of the first things was like they had just thrown together some really random name. I can't remember what the name was that they were running under, but they were like, that's not going to be good as a company name, is it? And I was like, probably not, no. Like spend some time and think about what it is, how your company will be perceived, whether or not your company name needs to say something about you, or whether it's just a fun moniker that you have that's out there, because that's quite an important part.
I think in terms of just like game development, it's cool to have like, you know, really artistic, like edgy kind of name and stuff like that. But then you've got to think of your company as like, okay, so what if this company survives for like 10 years, 20 years? Is that exactly where we want to be? I kind of like the way that Mediatonic, for example, have like named themselves, because they're just so, it's so ubiquitous. It can be put across like so many things. They could be a media company. I think in fact that they were before they actually got into games development. So it was very much something that can carry you through all the way to the end. So take some time in like thinking about your brand name and your branding, because it's so much about advertising and marketing your game. And part of that is the logo. Part of that is like choosing that sort of direction that you're going in, I think.
So it says a lot about like what your company is, or even like what kind of games you might be making. And in some cases, if you do make your name very personalized to the kind of games you're making, then really what you're saying is these are the kind of games we will be making for the next 10 years or whatever. I mean, obviously in some cases you can quite easily pull away from that. But I think once you kind of set yourself under this brand of this is what we do, that's kind of what people are going to be expecting of you. And pivoting later down the line is going to be maybe a little bit harder.
Yeah, it's always tricky to rebrand, isn't it? So it's just like, it's better to sort of think really deeply about what you want your company, what is your company about? What is your, I guess, rather than unique selling point, is like, what is the core tenets of your business? Like, if you were a vegetarian, maybe you wouldn't want to make games about selling sausages, for example. So you need to kind of make sure your branding is like synergistic. I think it's probably the easiest way to sort of start and sort of get some momentum behind what you're doing anyway.
Also, once you have like an ethos for how you want to run your company, it makes it a lot easier to bring people on board. Like you can say to them, this is the kind of company I want to build. This is the way that I think about things. This is possibly on a political level, like this is how liberal I am. And, you know, these are where my lines are, my barriers are. And so when you bring people on, they could be like, that sounds like something I'm on board with. Or they could be like, actually, our views aren't going to be the same, and therefore working together might be difficult. And so I'd rather not.
I mean, generally, if you've got a really strong brand, you tend to sort of attract people that are sort of more aligned with you anyway. Otherwise, they wouldn't even approach you if you weren't putting yourself across in that way. I mean, but the main thing is just because you have to take your time when making this decision, I think it's really difficult to say you're going to start a company, it's going to become an overnight success. So you 100%. Kind of have to think more like in years rather than in like weeks and months. So if you are going to spend years like starting up your company, then how are you going to survive in the interim, you know, while you are building that up? So the part-time hustle thing, I did something similar. You don't need to just give up everything and go at it.
And you
full-time.
Definitely shouldn't give up everything.
Yeah, it's so hard to know. I mean, you should absolutely do that if you think that you've got the experience and you think you can run at something. But if you don't have the experience, then try and get some, like in terms of like a game jam. Even just working in a coffee shop part-time is enough to sort of get you started. If you've never had a job before, you need to understand what it is to be employed so that you can become a good employer as well. You need to have a few bad bosses. You need to have a few good bosses as well to recognize, like, you know, what kind of person, what kind of boss you want to be. If you're being the boss at the end of the day, right? You're in charge of a lot of people. You're in charge of people's livelihoods.
I've got a lot of terrible bosses to thank for how good a boss I hopefully am.
No, I feel the same. You kind of, when you're a teenager and you're first getting those like really crappy jobs, that's a really good formative learning experience, I think, because I don't think if you don't go through that, you're more likely to be so abusable sort of later as well. So it's good just to get savvy in the workplace, like be on both sides, try to get into like management meetings and see what that's about. if you've never
Yeah,
had
for sure,
experience
yeah.
doing that. You said that maybe you, I think in the last video that you had definitely like rose quite quickly when you were doing
Yeah.
like things.
Yeah, every company that I've worked for, I tended to try and at least get into like supervisor roles, and in some cases making it to management roles. And you're right, once you're in those positions, you go from being like, my boss doesn't know what they're talking about, to, oh no, I don't know what I'm talking about, and so you kind of need to figure it out. And then you also get into this position where like sometimes you realize that the things that you thought was just an evil boss, like actually no, they had to make certain decisions a certain way, and you're going to have to do the same thing, and you're going to upset employees the exact same way. And I think when you start doing it for yourself, when you work, obviously when you go into like a coffee shop or working in a bar or whatever, the structure there is set. So you definitely do find these positions where you're like, oh, this is how I have to deal with it. But once you're doing it for yourself, you don't have to do that, but you do need to figure out what is going to work, and if it's going to work time and time again, or if you're just going to keep like, I mean, obviously you should keep iterating how you're managing people anyway, so you're getting better at it. But yeah, you're not tied to things, but at the same time you're very free, and that in itself is like a whole new thing to.
It can be super scary, especially when somebody's going when you're negotiating pay for the first time. It's just like, how much is fair, you know, for example. But how much is fair for the both of us? That's another question, isn't it? It's just like, okay, I would love to pay you what you're worth, but if you don't have the money in your account, then you can't. That's the thing. And I think that people that maybe look for jobs in indie companies don't quite realize like how many indie companies that there are out there making a game for the first time. They're not equal. You know, there's people that are starting up, you know, from scratch, and then there's some people that have been around for a few years, maybe have been doing it for a while. But even then, you need to gauge like the management and see what they're about, because if you don't understand like the culture of the company, it can be a bit of a nasty shock when you sort of arrive and you know things are supposed to be a certain way, and all sorts of things like that. I do also believe that in terms of managing people, you need to be a people person. And I don't think that people really develop that until they've been in the workplace for a long time, or understand what it is to be responsible for your home, your, you know, your lifestyle, paying for things. Like, money is power at the end of the day, and people kind of leave that till the last minute in terms of game design, because the thing that's really exciting is the game that's being developed. And the boring stuff like the finances and the business development and where are we going to be next year, 5 years, 10 years, it tends to be very reactive and not very proactive.
I think that's probably because most people come from this position of like, oh, I've been employed, and that you're used to a certain level of security, and you just kind of feel like, well, if I do it for myself, that same level of security surely is going to be there, but it's absolutely not. And again, like we were saying before, even if you're not the person who wants to set up the team and you want to go and join an indie team, you want to be the 3D artist on a team or something, you still need to check out the companies that you're joining. It can, especially right now, like there's a lot of people trying to get in, and it feels like, oh, any opportunity, just like give me that opportunity. But really, if you do just jump at any opportunity, you might find in 2 weeks' time that you hate what you've chosen, and then you've got to start again from scratch. So
it's real unfortunate that like people regret being in choosing what they do, if that makes sense. It's just like it's so hard because games take a really long time to make, and if you commit to something and then find out, you know, a few months down the line that it's really not what you want to do, and let's say the games company's not paying you, there's nothing stopping you from leaving, but it just feels so wrong as well. At the same time, there's a part of us that always wants to see something through, but sometimes it is healthier to walk away, which is why I quite like the idea of doing lots of game jams, just to like meet people, find people that you're going to really gel with. Like it took so Arrogant Pixel, me and Ben started making games in 2012, but we didn't end up incorporating until 2015. So genuinely it took us like 3 or 4 years to really figure out what kind of people that we were as like bosses and as maybe just team members, and then also what kind of people we want on board. And then it's not enough just to have skilled people, and it's not enough to have people that are excited about the project. You actually need to have people that are invested as well, and want to see. It's as important for them to succeed as it is for you to succeed, and then you're all on the same page, if that makes sense. I've always approached it from, I want to be in charge of what I'm doing, so I've never really seen myself as like wanting to work for somebody else. But again, there's indie companies that have been started by industry veterans that have tanked, just because they're not the kind of people that are suited.
They've got the right skills in game development, but not the right skills in business development, or not the right skills in like people development. I mean, I did the same thing early, starting up. In fact, my company had, I think realistically, it has gone through 3 different name changes, essentially. 2 actual name changes, but like, first of all, it was just me kind of doing my own thing with a friend, and then that was so much fun making that like first mobile game, tanking our first big project to get to that good mobile game. But and then after that, it was realizing I could do it for real, and the name that I had chosen for the fun thing that I was doing now needed to kind of be so originally we were called Level 7 Devil, and obviously my name's Ville. So we wanted to take the ego out of it and rename it so it's more about the games that we were making.
Oh, that's cool. I mean, to be honest, like, we put the ego back into our brand. So our brand's Arrogant Pixel. And the reason why we chose that was because we wanted a symbol. So we started off with the actual logo, which was like the red pixel surrounded by all the grey kind of thing. And we wanted the thing that what made us unique, or what we wanted to sort of portray, was that we stood out from the rest, because we very much were outsiders to the industry. I have never worked in AAA games development. I've never worked for an indie company besides my own, and we were very much from creative arts, music, all of that lot, and we were trying to break into an industry that we felt was very strange, and not strange and alien, it's just we've been admiring it from afar and wanted to break in, and we felt like we're just kind of different. We that's why we kind of chose the name that we were going for, and I hope that our projects kind of reflect that there's something a little bit different. We do things our way. And that's why it's called Arrogant Pixel, really.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Luckily, that makes sense.
Yeah, do you see what I mean? You need to be able to sort of explain the philosophy behind your brand. And that way it's all about the culture that you're sort of bringing to the table with all of your games, everything that you do, the social media that you put out, the sort of things that you are championing at the end of the day. You need to be able to project that all in a logo or in a name or in a game of some kind, because everything that you put out says something about your company. And this is really high level kind of thinking, but if you do that before starting, it's going to make things fit into place a little bit, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So once I decided that I wanted to switch from making mobile games to console games, I initially I just thought, oh, I've got the idea, and as always, I'll just start running with it. But then luckily I actually did take a moment of pause, and we spent 3 months in pre-production where I sat down with my co-founder and our writer, and literally just like pulled the entire idea out of my head to the point where like there was nothing left that hadn't been pulled apart. Or at least I hope that's where we got to. We certainly got to a point where there was enough story that I realized that I had enough story for more than one game. And so that's when I was like, okay, well, that's actually something that I can add as value to my team. I can say, not only are we making this game, but if this game is a success, I already have a path for us to go down for like the next game and the game after that. And again, it's like you say, like it's how you build that ethos into the company internally, and it's what comes out when you do your marketing and stuff. Like, this is what we're about.
Yeah, so strong branding essential for like starting up. Another thing that we could possibly talk about is just, again, coming back to like sort of the research and development, and then also the pre-production that you went through. I actually find that most of our ideas don't even get past like the pre-visualization stage.
Yeah.
And we emphasize rapid prototyping over like overly documenting stuff. So when we're coming up with ideas for games and for our next project, for example, we just go into some crazy creative frenzy where everybody's researching in all different directions, watching all the TV shows that we've missed out on while working on our last project, and then just coming up with all of these different ideas, and then we'll settle on one. Normally Ben takes point on like deciding which one we go for because he's the programmer.
Yeah.
But essentially programming starts on day one really of rapid prototype, because we need to make sure that the idea works before we start production. And there's been a few times where maybe we've gone into production too early without doing all the research, where we just like started running with something and gone like, okay, now we have to go back to the drawing board. And that's just always so heartbreaking to do that. So quick tip, just make sure you do your homework first. Like, look around at the market, look around at your competitors. I know it's horrible to think about other indie developers as competitors, but you kind of need to know what's around you, what's might be successful, what might not. Because the thing about games development is that it takes a lot of time. So if you're going to spend 2 years working on a project, how do you know that in 2 years' time that your project's even going to be relevant? You know, is the console...
That's definitely part of the roller coaster. Like, because there's no surefire answers. It's not like someone can say, you should definitely make this game because in 2 years, this will definitely still be a successful idea. But yeah, you're right. You do need to spend a fair amount of time in that pre-production phase, knowing you need to know your idea inside and out, really. And then it's just going to be a case of how well you execute your idea. And again, you're going to need the right people to do that. So
yeah, and again, like I found as well that finding the team has probably been like the toughest thing. Have you found that, like in terms of scaling up?
So I kind of feel like we did grow fairly quickly, but at the same time, I was kind of on a lucky streak. So I went from having just me and one other person to me and 5 people, I think within the space of a month or 2 months. And then we went all the way up to 20 people within the 3rd or 4th month, I think. Wow. I've since scaled down again because of the crazy time that we're in. And also because of the way that we function, I've helped a few people get careers, so they've left us because they've got a career somewhere else.
Yeah, that's great.
Which is kind of a double-edged sword. Like it's always amazing to help people out and help them along the way on their career. And then we take kind of a bit of a hit by bringing on someone new and like getting them up to speed and stuff. But at the same time, I'd rather run that way than have it be any other way.
I mean, you're providing an opportunity at the end of the day, and it's quite it's good to like sort of have like a healthy distance from that, because employees are always going to join and then leave eventually. It's like no one's going to stay with you forever. So it's good to know that you're providing this opportunity and to be responsible, because you are providing that opportunity as well.
And if you help people out in that kind of way anyway, it does tend to come back to you. Like they'll, maybe in a year or two's time when the company's doing super well and they've like up for an opportunity of leaving there, wherever it is they went to, they might come back and be like, yeah, absolutely. I don't think I've employed anyone that I wouldn't absolutely hire straight back if I could.
Yeah, no, of course, because they came from you at the end of the day. Yeah.
So I think that's a pretty good place to wrap up this episode. So thanks for watching this episode of the Game Dev London podcast. To find out more about Game Dev London, just visit gamedev.london. And until next time, I'll see you in the chats.